Yes, an 8-year-old and a 1-year-old. So she's back from school, but she can stay quiet.
Okay.
Whereas he's obviously as temperamental as 1-year-olds are.
Okay. Yeah, Dustin,
you got kids?
Oh no, I have a 2-year-old dog and she's a handful. Now Dustin can't hear you, buddy. Every time with you.
Every time
with you, I say.
Give it a moment.
All right.
Give it a moment.
Good day, sir.
Got it now?
Yep. Tell us about your children's troubles.
I said I'm having enough for the both of us, so you don't have to.
Carries the water for both of us. It's great.
Yeah, I'm having enough for both of us because that's how it goes. But
yeah.
How many kids you got?
I just had twin girls, and then I have a 4-year-old girl before that.
Oh wow!
So
you have got your hands full.
The identical twins are a little bit of a different challenge.
Yeah, all girls as well.
All girls as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
good luck, sir.
It's fun. It's fun. Yeah. That's kind of the stage that we're in right now. Just good luck. Hang on. Everything's just kind of a season, so this is just a particularly difficult season, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, can we call you James today?
James. Most people call me Jowse, but
Jowse.
We're gonna
go right to that. We're gonna go right to that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, like England, everyone's like surnames. Like
okay.
So I don't know if it's a thing in America, but yeah, everyone kind of just calls each other by their surname most of the time. My mum calls me James. My wife calls me James when I've done something bad. So.
Only when done something bad.
Hopefully, I've not been there. So we'll see.
Okay. So you're English. You're not Irish.
I'm not Irish. No.
Okay.
I'm English.
Okay, because we first heard.
So I'm easier to understand than Emma.
That's fair. That's fair.
Should be.
There was a guy at Westside for a long time. He goes back and forth. Peter Bremner. He's Irish, and sometimes his first time he came over, it was pretty rough. Like I'm not gonna lie, it was difficult to understand that man. Great, giant, jolly man, but half the time, half the things he said, like I didn't understand what he was saying. The more excited he got, the faster he spoke. I was like, oh, it's got worse.
He's got a heavy accent and slang, so
I mean, I'm from a place in the UK. We have counties here.
Okay.
So I'm from the county of Yorkshire originally. Although I live in Manchester now, which is a sin. So I don't know if you're aware of like English history, like the Battle of the White Rose and the Red Rose.
No, I missed that one.
There was a civil war between the Yorkshire and Lancashire, effectively.
Okay.
Which unfortunately Yorkshire won, and I now live in the red side. But yeah, it's an unwritten there's that war between the white and red rose, and then we have north and south kind of divide as well. So the north doesn't like the south, and the south doesn't like the north.
That's very interesting because in this country we have the same thing. We had the same thing happen. We had the war. It was called the Civil War because that was the best title we had for it at the time, and it was all north versus south. And let me ask you this: over there, to this day, do they still like talk down to each other and have this like odd-seated, like not animosity, but like, we won, you lost, and they're like, well, we're gonna come back?
No, we don't. No, we don't really have that. We have that with there's definitely not animosity. There's just like in England, like banter. So like, we won. But it's not like for the majority. There'll always be a minority, but for the majority of people, it's just fun. Just like when your football team beats soccer team, beats another soccer team, that jibe. But we always traditionally say like the north of England is more friendly than the south. Like if you go to the south of England, you go into London, you walk past, say good morning to somebody, they look at you like this, and you're like, why did you just talk to me? I was like, because it's a nice day and just said hello.
And they pick on the accent? Is that what they're picking up on? Like,
no, just actually in the south is just
that's the culture.
They're just the culture. They're just a lot less friendly and approachable and everything like that. Whereas in the north, we're all quite, hey, good to see you and everything like that. But there is that north-south accent divide. So I'm from Yorkshire. Sorry, we've gone around a long story here. So
that's
I'm
okay.
from Yorkshire, and we have my accent is very slow. So a joke in England is like, in Yorkshire is, what's the longest word in the dictionary? No.
Okay.
we
Just
extend slow, snow, go. Like we extend whereas south of England would be go. Whereas we extend it out and everything. So I'll be easier to understand than Emma because we just talk more slowly.
That's fair. That's totally fair. And to complete the circle, the full circle, when you were saying people in the north are much more friendly, here it's almost, I don't know, Dustin, like
it's
you live in the
Pacific. It's 100% the opposite.
Yeah, 100% the opposite. Like you live in the north, like I live in the Midwest, and people won't look at you when you walk past them. But where I'm from, like rural Virginia, like south of like Mason-Dixon, it's, oh, you don't even know each other, and you'll say hi to each other.
No, people in the South are, a random person on the street in the South is friendlier than like my best friend.
Oh, well, you're from Louisiana. Oh, you spent a lot in Louisiana. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Louisiana, and I'm now in the opposite. I'm the highest
but you know,
in the state, so I've seen the polar opposite. I live in a well, I don't know. Washington and England are very similar as far as climate, or I mean, maybe more northern England, I'd say. So, it's actually I like it over there in Scotland and stuff because it feels like you're living in Washington. It's the opposite as far as I don't know, just people's interaction. Where there's more sunshine, people seem to be more friendly, I guess.
This isn't part of the podcast, is it? Because we've got a feeling to upset a lot of customers here.
Well, our major viewership is in Ireland.
Yeah. Which we're trying to get shadow banned here. This is part of it. So okay, all right.
Jowsey hates the Irish. Jowsey hates this.
He works with everyone, but he really doesn't like anybody. Great. All right, so Jowse.
In Yorkshire, we don't like people. Like it was like, leave me alone. Although we're friendly at the time, but really it was like, no, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I just want to be on my own.
We have the same dynamics. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell everybody. So I mean, for people who aren't familiar with the UK training scene, with the Ireland training scene, explain to people, give everyone your story, where you are, where you started from, what got you the bug that thought to yourself, I want to get into strength and conditioning, I want to get into performance. And then what was the journey up until today? Extrapolate on it. Just give all the detail, everything.
How long you got?
I got plenty of time.
My background is professional soccer. So I went up through, like I say, I'm from Yorkshire, small seaside town in Yorkshire, and I, at a young age, got into the England schoolboy team. That took me from playing for my small local town to signing for Manchester United as a soccer team, where I was in the kind of what we call the academy youth team, so like under 16s, under 17s to under 19s, and then I made it to the reserve. So I was kind of like one step from making the grade in the professional ranks. I got released at the age of 20, so I was there for 4 years. But in that time, living life as a professional, I was interested in the strength and conditioning side. Like I'd go in the gym, I'd try and look after myself like that as best as the club made me aware. Worked with a nutritionist, tried to control my body fat, etc. Just loved being all those sides of being a pro and doing everything as far as I could to the best of my ability at that time. So, like I say, unfortunately, got released from there. Tried multiple trials to be other places, and ultimately was like, right, well, what do I want to do next? I got to the point where confidence was low, injuries were kind of hampering. I was playing with a torn quad and nerve pain running down my back, trying to get signed, and it was playing worse and worse, and didn't get signed. And then it was like, right, well, what do I want to do? I want to go into personal training. So got into personal training and quite quickly became fascinated with, like I say, I've always been a details man, and trying to get people to hit the correct form, correct positions, feel the right muscles. I found that I was missing a huge skill set in, I'd try as many cues as possible, but it didn't necessarily meant they felt the right muscles at the right time. So doing a glute bridge, and you're like, okay, how are your glutes today? And it's like, oh, man, my quads are smashed. I'm like, well, it all looked right, but the muscle pattern was way off. So from there, just ended up following loads of movement correction programs. Yeah, you name them. I've done the Check, the Gray Cook, the Gary Gray, and literally I ended up with being in a seminar with my Red Pill business partner, Phil Mansfield, who started talking to me about how our environment changes everything, and it just kind of ringing bells. And I say took these principles of training, which were, a lot of them came from the Gray Institute and Gary Gray, but was more angled towards strength and conditioning. It wasn't just the rehabilitation process. It was very much like building blocks from rehabilitation all the way through to performance. So I've been doing that. I started working with, in that time, I'd got into CrossFit myself, because I love the philosophy of trying to be able to do the foundational movements well. I was a stiff footballer that did a back squat like a good morning, and all those kind of things. So it pretty much became like wanted to help fix myself, so to speak. And it just married very well with CrossFit and helping people, and quite quickly became was getting good results with the competitive athletes, but it evolved beyond just the injuries and movement into, I was getting people coming back saying, oh yeah, I'm feeling a lot better, I've got less pain, I've everything like that. Oh well, sorry, I'm moving better, but I've got the pain. And then I'd look at the program and see issues with the program as to, well, you don't have the movement efficiency to deal with a squat, and you're squatting 3 times a week. Like you just need to have an adapted program where you only squat once, and you work on kind of accessorizing the squat with these development programs, and then we build how much you can tolerate from there. So yeah, then ended up coaching the CrossFitters, and yeah, that was, I say 2011 was working with them from a movement efficiency biomechanical standpoint, and then by 2015 I was coaching and programming and doing everything. And now later in life, I'm now 3 years into a sports science degree, so I'm very like yourselves. I know you've got the sports science degree there. Like I'm obviously doing the learning part. I've done a lot of learning, but not the official piece of paper stuff. Come to that in later life. So I'm 3 years into that now, and getting to apply but coming from the experience of practical knowledge into that, and then figuring out the where's the why's there. And yeah, so always developing as we all are, and that's probably pretty much up to date.
Okay. Well, totally. Before we really move on to like the crux of what we want to talk to today, your time with Manchester, did you ever meet any of either of the Cleggs?
Yes, Mike Clegg was. Yeah. Nick Clegg. Yeah, he was strength and conditioning coach when I was there. So he taught me to power clean and split jerk. But like back then it was a very new process. So a lot of the time it was very. I did those as extras so like I'd always do those pre-match day. I was goalkeeper, so explosion was obviously key. And I'm not that big either. I'm only 6 foot, so 180 centimeters, which for a goalkeeper is small. But I had I could jump and headbutt the crossbar from static, and I don't know why I tried to do that, but it was just a goal. It did hurt.
It did hurt, but you did it.
A standard test for goalkeepers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Are you crazy enough to be a goalkeeper? Check. So worked with Mick Clegg. Mike Clegg was actually he was in the reserves at the time I was playing. So I do know Mike as well. So yeah, are you familiar? You know the Cleggs, or just
I know of them. Yes. Yeah. Yes, I know of them, but that world of top end pro soccer, or you call football over there, that fascinates me. it's just such a it's like it's American football, but overseas. Like that's how big it is. And I think it's incredible. That's great.
Yeah, it's huge. And the thing is, it's still, I mean, sports science is a lot bigger in, like, that was early back then. That was the early days. Like I said, we only went in the gym once, twice a week.
Yeah.
Really. And even then it was very, back then they mainly did upper body with us. Didn't really do legs. I'd say I did the extra. So I did the Olympic lifting stuff that they did, like their son Steve. No, Steve's the other one that played. Mark Clegg. He actually was on the Olympic team for Olympic lifting. So there's brothers there. So there's a family of,
that's studs.
Yeah, so they've got one of them's a British powerlifting champion, and the other one was a Olympic weightlifter. They didn't quite make the Olympic, but he was on the GP team. I'm not fully up on that, but yeah. So they're good athletes, all around powerful guys, which is why Mick ended up in the job, because Mike and Steve were coming through the system, and they were just so much stronger, faster than the other lads. So they got a job. But like I say, it was still in that transition phase of they'd done all the work with those lads growing up, but it was still in that, don't do the legs because it's that football thing of the legs need to be fresh. And whereas sports science is getting involved a lot now, it is a bigger part of the professional football now. But even then, there's still this. There's a lot more on monitoring load. Measuring accels, decels, making sure the volume of that is under control, that they're hitting enough that would facilitate stimulus, and then they didn't do more kind of the strength work as testing rather than as all out development.
Well, I mean, hypothetical. I mean, knowing now in 2022, what you wish you knew then, if you were in the strength conditioning position there for Manchester, for Chelsea, for Arsenal, and any of the big guns, and you were the strength conditioning coach, what would a week look like for a professional soccer team? Say off season, they don't have any matches. Always thinking about it. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's difficult because I actually come from. I'm very, like, the thing with football. It's so different to American football.
Oh, how so? I'll go into that. Yeah.
Like, because American football is obviously so stop-start. Like, so you've got that all-out power, just pause, explode, hit the other guy as hard as you can. Whereas, like in football, like those guys cover over 10 kilometers a game.
Oh, we're talking about like American football versus soccer.
Yeah. So American football.
I thought you were saying
soccer,
like American soccer MLS. Like, oh god. Okay.
No,
all right.
no, sorry, no. Yeah, so American football. So like the traditional.
Yeah.
Obviously, like a lot of the rugby strength and conditioning will be similar to American football strength and conditioning, and it's very like power and strength is everything, and that is coming into football. But I think there's a missing. I think we can get caught up in strength and conditioning because we love it we love the idea and we see its value, and we can get very caught up in that. Okay, I've made that person stronger, and I've made them more powerful, and they are faster in this battery of tests within the gym and here. And then we don't necessarily accept that an injury might come because of that.
Right.
We assume that we've made them better. Like, we've made them better, but have we actually ruined their performance? Like, the big thing with soccer is it's obviously so multi-directional that it creates a lot of stiffness within the tendons, which is needed, but then within the hips. So the hips become stiff as they need to protect the hips. But then when we then go into strength and conditioning, we then, like, what I'm always thinking about is, well, what's my counter adaptation? So yes, I make you stronger, but what do I also do from that? Or how am I getting that? Am I creating even more stiffness around the joint, which now restricts my ranges, so that if I get moved out of those ranges, do I end up in an injury?
Sure.
So therefore, like, I do walk a tightrope with it, where when we look back at the old, and I think we've gone with sports science, we've got into that. We've obviously got the two sides of, we've got quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis, and we're becoming very much down the quantitative because it can easily show progress, measurements, and go, look, here we started this and now you can lift this, so you are 10% stronger and you are 10% more powerful. And that qualitative piece is kind of moving away. And then when you look back at like the books of I don't know if I'm going to say it right, Verkhoshansky.
Oh, you did. So, like, good one. Yeah, nice.
Like, you look at those books and you see that they're actually talking about, I say, that quality of movement. Like, why are we training? Why train athletes like bodybuilders? Why do the isolated strength work to make that tissue stronger? Like, you should be training movements. And there's that element of a disconnect with the strength. Like, there's almost that fashion at the moment of, well, if we can measure it and do that, it's great. And then we've lost that ability to go, well, yeah, but is that a good squat? Is that a controlled? I've seen, being in professional soccer training grounds, and the guys have been lunging up and down with holding 2 dumbbells, and they look like they're going to fall over. And I'm like, like, just because they can't do the exercise. Like, let's start with the fundamentals of the strength and conditioning. It should first of all come from, can they control their body through that exercise first and foremost, before we think about making it super difficult or be that load or whatever. Like, why are we doing that? So yeah, to kind of, that's whereas in a sport of, like, a power output sport, is very different. Whereas football, like, say, you've got to be able to tolerate like 10K of running at various speeds. That's a lot of hopping, jumping, like, change of direction there. Like, well, can you control the forces of a hop and a land? Like, how much are we working on that versus actually just working on the ability to concentrically produce force? And I know there's a balancing piece in that, because obviously, while they're doing so much eccentric loading via the X cells, D cells, how do we then, the safe realm is then to go, well, if I do loads of concentric work, then we're offloading the tissue. But, like, say, what is our byproduct of excessive tension around the joints? So yeah, I don't know if that.
No, that's great. And actually, yeah, that's actually funny, Dustin. We just sat down with Coach Witherspoon, who is the performance scientist for the Super Bowl champion LA Rams for American football here.
Right.
And he brought up a similar point where you have a quantitative versus a quality. And he's more about doing things savagely well and getting that quality down before moving on, because that quality will translate to quantity. Quantity doesn't necessarily translate to quality. So you have to have that one direction. Now, that's a phenomenal philosophy of quality. Now, if you had to lay that out in a week, like, what would it look like taking that quality across a week? What does a training schedule look like for a pro soccer player?
Schedule. Like, the off season, if we were going to go summarize, if I could summarize the year, so if we go off season, so off season would be the place where you develop that player's individual needs. So I'm working with a player at the moment who I've rehabbed from a lateral meniscus transplant, really bad transplant with an osteochondral defect.
Wow.
I came in as an external person to help at the request of the guy's agent, which the club weren't happy with because they wanted their guys to do it. But
right, they always do. Yeah.
From a sense of, like, the guy's gone through and he's had since getting back into training, he's had no days off with swelling, which with an osteochondral defect post meniscus is like, they just can't believe it. But like, I worked here that this guy is a sub 11 second 100 meter runner. He's
quick,
sharp. He has tendonitis, but he has tendonitis. Like, and what worked on with him was, well, actually, as soon as you slow him down, he actually has no ability to control slow motion. So he uses speed for stability, which is why then the tendons, obviously, as you guys know, tendons at high speed, shorter going contact times, more tendinous loading. So it's one of those scenarios where actually slowing him down, working on his ability to control his body in single leg environments is where he was basically like, if you said, oh, watch this video of this athlete, does he look like a pro athlete? And you go, absolutely not. But watch him move on a football pitch at 10 meters per 11 meters per second that he travels at when he's on a pitch. And you go, wow, that guy's incredible. And it's like working on the gaps of the player. So rather than it being that, like, what is that player's gap? Is it that they need to be slowed down, or is it that they lack the power output? And unfortunately, I see a lot of testing going on, and actually then everyone's on the same program. It's like, well, you've seen that they lack the drop jumps, but then they lack the height in the reactive jumping scores, but then you're just giving them strength work.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you doing very, very, like, you do very low level? It's amazing what the guys can and can't do when it comes to really low level plyometrics. It doesn't have to be jumping off a 30-inch box, depth jump into max broad jump. It can be as simple as just learning how to do a pogo properly and be explosive in a pogo.
Sure.
Jump.
Sure. And with an athlete like that, I feel like a lot of you could be gaining a lot of injury prevention with specifying that program to doing those things. I mean, I don't think it's equal across the board. As far as if you had a really weak athlete, if you made them stronger, you wouldn't necessarily make them more injury resistant. But I do think with like the person you're describing there that had poor reactive stuff and was using speed as control, it's the type of athlete that I've seen where you could put a bar on their back, and for the first time squatting, they might be able to move a substantial load, but to be able to control it down, it might look like a crazy, terrifying free fall. So, and at that level, you'd think you'd want to get at that specificity. But I know I cut you off. You're kind of going through a flow there with that athlete, but you're laying out exactly, like, I think that's a very we still see it everywhere where you have an athlete where you've identified. I mean, why use the tests that are going to give you the clues to maybe how to specify a program for an athlete like that and then not use it? I think everything still needs to continually kind of get to, like, I don't know, maybe it's laziness, but if you know those things and you have those identifying markers, you should be working to make the program, like you're saying, more specific to that athlete.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, unfortunately, with any athlete, we've only got so many hours in a day. And I don't get better at playing soccer by playing American football. I get better at playing soccer by doing soccer. So, like I said, for me, again, that whole piece where a lot of coaches can get caught up in, oh yeah, I made them stronger, and then 6 weeks later they were injured. Did you cause that injury? Because I see it all the time with people following mobility programs. Oh yeah, I'm following ROMWOD and I'm following GoWOD and all these apps for daily stretching. And then it's like, okay, and now I've got low back pain. It's like, okay, how long have you been following? Sorry, you've had low back pain for how long? Okay, and do you do any stretching? And I've tested them. I can see they've got great range of motion in isolation. God, do you do stretching at all? Like, oh yeah, I've been following GoWOD. Or ROMWOD, I don't know if I should be calling these names out, but flexibility programs.
Well, it's the program isn't the problem. It's the person. Maybe you're not using it might work for someone really well, but if you don't have a professional saying like, hey, this is a suitable thing for you to be doing, it's like, it's just like going to the grocery store and buying random ingredients and throwing it together and thinking it's going to make good soup. It's like, no, you need to follow the recipe that's right for you.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with these, a lot of time you can trace it back to that daily stretching has caused an injury, because what unfortunately it's done is it's actually taught the body to become the Golgi tendon organs to shut off at areas of max tension, but it's going to find tension somewhere else. So it just finds it in the lower back, and they end up then with a lower back that blows up every time they do deadlifts, because they can now put the hand, keep the legs completely locked, fold over like a deck chair and put the hands flat on the floor and not feel the hamstrings. It's like, well, that isn't conducive to deadlifting. Like those two tasks, having that does not make you a big deadlifter. So why are you putting those things together? And that's going across strength and conditioning of, yes, I'm doing X, and now my player's injured. But then we take the six, as I always say, that I was the goalkeeper, so I was always the person to take the hit if we got beat anyway. And I do exactly the same now as a coach, where, right, okay, if my athlete fails, what did I do wrong? I don't turn and point the finger. I look at myself and go, right, what was wrong in the program? Did I miss the timing? Did I miss that? What do we miss? Obviously, I getting older and accepting, yes, it isn't all on me. But I still always question myself first and foremost, in what have I done wrong? And I think that is the most important thing, is that as strength and conditioning, all that matters is if you can tell me, if I go, oh yeah, I made the players stronger, but we've got 12 people in the treatment room who are the strongest in the club. Like, okay, there's a disconnect there. Like, what matters is I get out on that pitch. That all that matters is that player is available to get on that training pitch every day. If he can be on the training pitch every day, then the adaptation that he's going to get from the chronic adaptation of being able to do all that volume of running, accels, decels, he's going to become a phenomenal athlete because he's able to tolerate training. Whereas if they can't tolerate training, or you push them so hard that they break and then they're just doing this, they're never, like, they're there to be footballers, or they're there to be that sport. They're not there to be powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters. We've got to understand where our line and how strong they need to be, really. Like, what are the key fundamentals of the sport? And that's where, like I say, we miss a lot of the power endurance work. Like, we get very caught up in, oh yeah, it matters what your 1s and 2s and 3s are, but it's like, but hang on a minute. Good run cadence is, for a middle distance runner, is 180 beats per minute. That's 90 contacts per leg. Like, how is 3x10? Like, how is 3x10 single leg down the movement jump?
Right.
Like, where is the tolerance there? And we've got very caught up in strength. Strength is 1 to 5, power is 1 to 3, hypertrophy 6 to 12. And it's like, no, like they're tolerating, as I said, 10 kilometers of running with high speed accels, decels. If I can get them to fatigue off 20 hops, that's a problem. And that's going back to that footballer. That's where I built up to the fact where we were doing over 300 contacts per leg, single leg at least. And it was just a case of, like, that obviously built up over time. It was like, I saw when he would fatigue. And that's where I think a lot of the key of his rehabilitation came, is like, I wasn't worried about the numbers of what he could hit. It was like, all I care about is how long he can go for.
Yes.
And if I know that he can control for a long period of time, then he's going to be safer as soon as he gets back into sport. And that's where professional football, because it is so different to the there's an output, but it requires a hell of an output for a very long period of time, multiple times. So yeah.
Jowse, in America here, in American football, we have a really popular saying that gets hammered way too often, but it's the best ability is availability. And what you're saying when it comes to, you're not training an Olympic lifter, you're not training a power lifter. That is, and Justin had this discussion with multiple coaches, that there are a lot of strength and conditioning professionals that treat it as the weight room is this massive do or die scenario, and you have to get absolutely better at however many major lifts you're doing to increase. And at the end of the day, like I tell this to athletes I work with all the time, and I told it to when Dustin and I were on the DoD project working for the U.S. Army. I told it to soldiers, like, I think it's great. I think if you want to go from deadlifting 500 pounds, 600 pounds in a year, I think you can, because you haven't actually trained for it. At the end of the day, though, if you go from deadlifting 500 to 600 pounds and you go on the field of battle and you can't perform, someone's going to die or you're going to die. Or if you're a football player, you go from deadlifting, 450 to 600 pounds, 150 pounds, but you can't accelerate on the field. What good is it? So I think you're right up the correct alley, man.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to hear. And like I say, it's unfortunate that sitting on the degree, like I've been the old man in the room, like unfortunately going through a process where you've got young kids doing the degree who don't necessarily know what they want to do. And they're not taking in those fundamentals of physiology from that cellular level all the way through, and understanding, well, actually, when I do physiology, if I understand physiology, I understand what adaptations I'm going to get from my strength stimulus. Whereas they're almost just, oh yeah, well, I want to do strength and conditioning. They get 60%, 40% on physiology, and it's like, yeah, but so all you know now is reps and sets. And you don't really know what you're affecting, and that's unfortunately where it goes wrong. Because yeah, I think I'm just glad I'm doing it in later life now with the passion for the subject and coming with this versus having done it just to tick a box as a kid to get a job. And like I say, witnessing in professional sport people watching a walk-in lunge and thinking that that's okay to give them weight, and it's like, I know at the time I'm just a personal trainer, but fundamentally we as personal trainers were grounded in, this is how you teach exercise, and this looks good and this looks bad. Like, this is good form, this is bad form. Whereas, in the degree scenario, we spend a lot of time obviously learning the nitty gritty of the science, but then actually that practical application is
huge.
Like this portion of the degree that we're coming out with when I need this. So yeah,
you're hitting the nail on the head as far as I think how the structure of that process is laid out, and why I think it is a little bit backwards, because I was kind of like you, where I came in with my own personal experience of playing and being an athlete and coaching people before I ever had any paper credentials, so to speak. But there's the thoughtfulness that you have in your approach, and the things that you're thinking about, and the things you see value in. That's the minority, I think, of coaches. And I don't know where it comes from. If it comes from exactly what you're laying out, where it's a lack of experience and a deep knowledge of textbooks and a small knowledge of experience. Because I'm huge on, there's so much more value in 3 months of spending time working with, a coach that's been coaching for 30 years than I could ever glean from, 10 textbooks. I think both are important. But the other thing is, and why I think I've said this myself, where I'm appreciative of doing things after, because I could ask thoughtful questions, because I was asking from experience, as opposed to, in my undergrad degree, I'm just there to sit and listen, because I wasn't in a position to ask questions, because I didn't know anything to ask, other than something that might be presented in the book. That's a huge thing. Not asking the right questions, or not being able to ask the right questions, really limits the knowledge you can gain from an experience or the setting. And it's huge. The more internship type experiences a coach can have early on. I know most of those degrees require you to do one single internship. If by any means you can, if the opportunity is there, whether it be local or you got to travel somewhere, that's what you should be doing. Not to mention, it'll help narrow that focus of maybe the specific place you want to head with that degree. But no, you're hitting on there's a lot of things I'd like to unpack, because you dropped a few little things that I don't think it's a common mentality to have some of those things and the carryover with exercise and things like that. There's a lot of things being missed, even at the highest levels, in American football, which I think probably gets the most qualified, credentialed coaches, I guess. If you were to lay everyone out on the table, like who are the badasses in the realm? They're in American football in the United States, and that doesn't mean they're all badasses. They have a badass position, but there is a huge lack of thoughtfulness by some people in the field, and they got there by whatever means there. I'm not knocking them, but there's still a whole bunch of thoughtfulness missing from that sport, and things that can still be looked at, and conversations that still haven't really transpired. So I think a lot of things you're laying out it's applicable to every coach working with a high level athlete, or in that setting, a high level setting.
Yeah, so, for sure.
So real quick, so transitioning off soccer and onto what I originally talked to you about talking about. So now we know each other and we're comfortable. Let's start the podcast.
I mean, like if we need to go again, like Zach, I love this stuff. So
so do we. That's our problem. That's our problem
all day.
We can do this all day too.
If we need to go again next week, we go again next week. Like there's no problem.
We'll get you on again down the road, 100%. So from 2011 to 2022, that's essentially your time, give or take, in CrossFit, correct?
Coaching. Well, I think coaching high level 11. Yes. But I started doing CrossFit in 2006. So
okay. When it comes to coaching though, so 2011 to 2022, so like 11 years of being like hands-on individual athletes. Now, to my knowledge, you handle probably the biggest female name to ever come out of Ireland, so Emma McQuaid. And then how long did you work with Sam Briggs?
So I've been working with Sam for over 10 years. So 2011 was when I started working with Sam. So I started with the movement development stuff, because that was kind of, Sam came to the sport. She was late. She was 29 back then. She'd had years of sport, and the movement stuff was where she struggled with. So that's where we started. And then I was working with her when she won the games, and then she moved over to America. She was over here for a couple of years. So we kind of like worked intermittently, but not as close. And then she injured her shoulder. She came back over to England in 2016 and had a shoulder that wasn't in great shape, which she got through the season with, like finished 4th at the games, and I decided to retire at that point because of where everything was feeling like. And it turned out she had pretty much about one thing left in a rotator cuff, no bicep tendon, no labrum, and went through the CrossFit Games like that. The girl is absolutely something else. So then it was like, well, what about if I coach you, rehab you, and we just see where it goes? And then, so that's from 2017, like she'd gone from retiring, she'd had an extra five years of competing. And in that time, like 17, she was training with me, and then Emma was looked up to. Sam was obviously the UK legend, and the one everybody was the one at the forefront of it all, and her and Emma got close, and Emma just came on board in 2000. So after that 2017 season, so she came and did a kind of pre-regional camp with Sam, where she'd come with like a pretty bad, she'd had not been able to squat properly because of back and hip pain. So we helped her with that leading into the regionals, and she didn't quite make the game. She fell short just there, and then she wanted to come on board after kind of seeing the work that how we worked with Sam. So then I've been coaching Emma since 2018.
Okay.
It's just been steady progress.
Yeah, progress all the way up.
Year and year.
From 2011 to 2022, what's the biggest change working with that level of CrossFit athlete that you think to yourself, like, oh, if I knew like then what I know now, I would be doing that different?
Great question.
This is a deep one. I could tell.
Yeah.
This is a deep one.
Yeah.
Well,
It is deep.
I think the other
I
factor
suppose you could. Sorry, go on.
no, I was gonna say the other factor I guess to think about there too is how the games have progressed in that time. So not just like your own knowledge that you've gained, but you've obviously had to adapt to what you're seeing as far as the requirements or what, you know, what the competition's looking like. Cause it's not, you know, it's not what it was in the beginning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, the standard is, like I say, it is just exponential. So it is incredible. That's what I love about it is the sport of strength and conditioning, effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you've got to be able to understand your energy systems to be able to condition them well enough. But and this is why I love it, because it is just a game. Like, it's just this huge puzzle of, right, they've not got enough conditioning, but if I do too much conditioning, then I lose the strength. But then I'm robbing from there. So, okay, but how do I keep, I call it just the spinning plates. How do I keep this plate? I'm gonna spin this one a bit faster now and just slow this one down.
Sure.
So we kind of like, I do it very differently to how other coaches do it, because I'm not traditionally, as far as I'm aware, I don't spend a lot of time. Like I say, I like working with the athlete and seeing what they're presenting and then using the principles to figure it out rather than following a system. So some athletes, like if you take Sam and Emma, they're polar opposites. So you've got Sam, who is the absolute will go all day long. Emma has just this stupid high power cardio output, but that actually isn't, like, not necessarily the strongest, but stupidly powerful for her body weight. And it's kind of taking those and going, right, well, in off season, Sam needs very little cardio, but then we work on the strength. But then you go down that traditional path and go, right, well, let's follow the principles of strength and go, I need to do 5x3, 3 to 5 minutes rest, and maximally load the weight. And we do that, and we do it week on week, and she gets better, and she gets stronger. And we do that with power, and we let her fully recover. But what we've actually found is that it's a theory. It's a theory, but with the highly aerobic athletes, like, I think they just get cold too quickly. So when we go through that process, actually that, like, at the beginning when she's warm, she'll hit her power and then it'll just drop off. But it'll drop off. You won't get anywhere near numbers, percentages if you give her hit one rep every 3 minutes as maximally as possible. She just gets cold and stiff and she doesn't hit the stimulus. Whereas if you actually give her that on, like, put her into, like, Sam always PBs after her heart rate's been at 180, having done a 10-minute workout, full of blood, full of tension, and then she'll go hit a PB. Like, it is just
the diesel engine athlete. It takes a long time to get it going, but once it's there, I guess that's a very interesting thing to think about.
And it's just that, like I say, so you follow the traditional principle. It's like, and I see it all the time on social media, like, oh, you just need to follow a strength program. It's like, do you think I've not followed, like, well,
they know better than you.
They know better.
They know better than you, Jowse. Yeah. That's why you're wrong.
I didn't.
Internet, are right.
I didn't think.
I didn't think about it.
Why didn't I start with what the basics were?
Oh,
And
5x5.
Like, it's seeing that it didn't work, and that's the kind of the process with it all, is going, like, it's knowing what you need to have, but then seeing how the athlete responds. So it is just, I wish I had, to answer your question, I suppose, I wish I had the experience now of the 10 years in 2011.
Okay.
That's fair. Would be the simple.
That's totally fair.
Would be the simple answer, because, like I say, it's almost that learning by proxy and failure of going, well, you followed the systems, you followed the principles, and it just didn't give me my result. But how do I get there? How do I get there quicker next time? And that's unfortunately, experience gives us that, doesn't it? It gives us that, right, I've seen this athlete before now. She's come from a highly aerobic background. I'm not even going to bother with a strength program. I'm going to give her a strength program that well, I'm not going to bother with the traditional strength program.
Right.
I'm going to accept that actually maybe 10 by 10 is better for her.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
10 by 10 into a 1 rep max to finish.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you just gotta steer into it with those athletes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm working with 2 females now. They've both gone to the games as a team. I think one's been twice. No, she's not. Actually, no, I take it back. They've both been 3 times on a team to the games at CrossFit. So whether or not people think that that's impressive or not, like that's still pretty good. You can't be a slouch and go to the games on a team. You can't. Yeah. And what you said there, your theory about having them do, like, let's be honest here, like for the majority of us who are lazy, like you'll look at what they're doing to like get ready to do a 1 rep, and it looks horrible. Like, I'm not going to do that before I do a 1 rep. Dustin, I don't know about you. I'm not. Like, I'm not doing like a 10-minute Metcon and an assault bike before doing a back squat. Like, no, I'm not doing it. But these 2 females, I do the same thing you do. I have them do something for 400 meters, which is around the building that we train at, some sort of sled or strongman variation, and then come in. And I'll tell you, they pop immediately. They can hit whatever you ask them to hit maximally and with efficiency. So total theory.
I've thought about this too, and I wonder if you could do muscle fiber typing on some of these people, because I felt like I was one of these weird ones too, where some of my own personal training was something I would not use for an athlete that I'm working with, because I've done some stuff like that for myself that seemed very beneficial to me, but I'm like, this doesn't follow principles like in a textbook the right way, along with like high volume training. And I think all these things are isolated in their realms where they come from, like I guess typical high volume or a 10 by 10 or something like that. Like that's bodybuilding world type training. And now also part of this podcast is weaving this tapestry together of how these things might influence, something like a CrossFit athlete or a football player or a soccer player, whatever it might be. But when you get these special people at the top, or did they train into it? Was this because of, Sam's background before she got into CrossFit? Because I always felt that I'd spent so much time. I was a 2-sport athlete mainly, but I spent so much time playing soccer in America that a lot of the football activities were so different for my body to manage that I had trained myself into a certain type of athlete where the power and things like that, like it wiped me out. But going 12 miles a day on a soccer pitch was no big deal. So I don't know if you train into these qualities, or if, the muscle fiber and how you're kind of already set up can dictate it. And that's what allowed them to get to that level that they're at. I don't know. I definitely think there's something going on there though, that's, continually worth looking into and talking about, because it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And there is that why, isn't it? That's the fun piece of like, well, is it what is occurring? That's what I want to know. What is occurring in said athlete at that high heart rate? Like, is it that the heart rate is somehow stimulating the nervous system to be better in some way? Like, or is it that it's then just making that production of energy at cellular level better, so actually they can release more ATP? Like, what is it that which one is it? Like, and that's the unfortunate thing, that like I've had to prep my research proposal for my dissertation. And the first couple of things when I was speaking to the lecturers about, I was like, I'd really like to do it on this, and this. And like, well, that's probably a PhD. What you need to do is keep it more simple. So I've had to go away and kind of angle it down somewhere else. But it is that, unfortunately, like a lot of the time, they have to look at that. Well, am I seeing this? Like I'm literally I'm going to do this training type, and all I'm going to look at, because I'm a physiologist, is I want to see what's happening cellularly. And then it's almost like, why can't we have the neurological strength and conditioning guy coming in here measuring this, as well as then the physiological guy measuring this and this bit. Like we can figure out like what is everything going on. That would be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, that research process means that we're looking with a tunnel vision, because you have to, because you can only measure can only measure so much, and there's only so much time in the day. But yeah, I'd love to know.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. So when we had Emma on, she mentioned something that really piqued Dustin and I's curiosity about you, about your philosophy in general, at least in the last several years, since you've been working with her since 2018. She told us that in the quote unquote CrossFit off season, you're 3 months at least out from the open. She mentioned that you like to get her as far away from CrossFit as humanly possible, and then rotate her back to CrossFit, several months leading in to see what that's benefited. Can you go into some detail with that?
Yeah. Like it's very much like we're kind of the way we look at everything is very much on a sense of the continuum of skill and threshold. So I'm either like on that continuum, like obviously everything within sports science is ultimately a continuum. I've got anaerobic here and I've got aerobic here. I've got stability here, I've got flexibility here, I've got power here, I've got endurance. Well, depends where we want to go. Do we want to go power here, strength here, or where does that fit? Or and here what we kind of look at is we've got skill and threshold. So at this end, the most highly skillful sport in the world is darts. Like, because it's the most minutia of release, minutia of release, like where it is. And because of that, I need to be very, very still with a very low heart rate and lots of rest. Like there's very little like repeatability on it. It's 3 darts done. There's no threshold. Whereas then at the simplistic side of it, for the high power outputs, you've got your effectively is running, because running has less skill than cycling. So running would put at this end, like your marathon running would be all the way here. And then you come down, like you're basically moving towards, well, in the middle would be football, because you've got to have skills. You've got to be able to kick a ball, control a ball, coming down over the top whilst running at max speed with your heart rate at 180. So that is then a blend of skill and threshold. So what we're a look at then the athlete is then going, right, what skills have we got? And what skills can tolerate? What skills have you got at threshold? So yes, you can barbell cycle. You can hit. You can go and do muscle ups off a run with your heart rate at 180, and you can execute ring muscle ups. Versus you have 2 ring muscle ups, and as soon as I get your heart rate up, you've got none. So it's very much then going, right, in that skill, you don't have that skill under a threshold. So we're going to work on those skills and those developments, and then over the course of the season, then bring them back together. Because within that, obviously, when I put the skills together, it becomes within that environment. Obviously, when we work at high thresholds, it's highly neurologically taxing. And then when I work on a new skill, it's highly neurologically taxing. So if I'm going to put those 2 things together, then before I know it, a lot of the time I have well and truly beaten up the athlete for a whole year. So that's where I really like to separate it out and go, right, yes, I could condition you doing long WODs, WODs with, let's do 150 wall balls into a run, into some light power cleans, like, and we could just do CrossFit conditioning over longer time domains. But I don't like to necessarily do that all the way through the season, because I look at it and go, well, what are my considerations? 150 wall balls, loads of eccentric load, all that stress. Like if I want to just work on the heart, lungs, cardiovascular system, well, I'm going to stick them on the bike and say, enjoy 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, because I need you to get that adaptation without also what we're saying of like, how do I spin the plate? How do I get strong without fatiguing them in the, I mean, I am still going to fatigue them because there is that, if I put Emma, well, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Like, this is why we love it, is Emma is the high power output athlete. So I give her 1 week, two weeks before semi-finals, I give her 15 cal assault bike, all out, rest 3, however many minutes rest it was. And literally she vomited halfway through. Like, she has that power capacity to take herself there. Whereas Sam did exactly the same session. It wiped her out neurologically, but there was no vomit because she's so aerobic. Whereas then on that flip reverse, when I put her in her weakness and say, right, sit on a bike for hold your heart rate at 150 to 170 and hold that there for 40 to 60 minutes, because that's not in her nature, that will also leave a mark. So either way, we're always leaving some neurological fatigue, because either they can access it or it's so taxing for the system because they can't do it that it's there. So that's where I do like to just go, right, like Emma probably told you, every morning she does aerobic work. And then as it gets closer in, like, so now, like, four sessions, she's still doing aerobic every day, but one of the sessions is now with a weights vest and hitting air squats and everything like that, which is already leaving its mark. Like, I know when I put everything together for Emma, because she so can access that power and everything like that. Like, neurologically, I get a lot of fatigue, like pain feedback quite quickly. Things start to hurt and break down under those loads. So I try and keep away. Like, only give it to her for as short a period of time as possible, really.
That's really interesting. It makes a lot of sense too. I mean, my mind also goes to the fact that with an athlete, if a coach not thinking about it, you might be choosing exercise if you want to condition someone with a WOD, that if there's such a degradation of the quality of the movements, there's also a much higher injury if you're doing that all the time, as opposed to you throw them on a bike. I'm not worried about anything getting hurt because of the fatigue that's setting in. I think that's a huge thing over a CrossFit career, or over anything where you're trying to do it for a long time at a high level, but also come out as a functioning person at the end too, and not totally ripped apart. I think there's a lot of value to that, thinking about those things and simplifying it so that you're not, if you're already trying to balance a lot of things, it doesn't do any good to break one of them. You drop a plate, because you can drop a plate entirely and it shatters, and then you gotta, and I guess exactly. then they come to you. It seems like that's what happens when a plate shatters. They come back to you and need to rebuild the system.
Yeah. And I think of that, the philosophy is as much born out of the experience of being an athlete, being in pro soccer. It's like, we didn't play 11v11 90 minutes every single day. We did 4v4s, we did set pieces, we did shape of play. Like, you do all these things that as a pro athlete isn't fun. And I always lay that out. Like, look, for a lot of period of this season, you are going to be not doing the fun stuff, and that is where guys especially find it hard to be coached by someone like myself, because they just want to be doing the sexy stuff, the stuff on Instagram, competing with the mates, whereas the girls they're just more coachable. They listen. But like I said, that is my philosophy. I said, look, I'm gonna break it. We're gonna work on the elements of the sport and make sure they're good in their entire, because the test, it could be sit on a row and do a marathon, please.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it
Like-
could be. Yeah.
Right.
Like and that gets announced, and we're just like, yeah, like say you go with that. Yeah, really, anything does go, but like how much of it? And there is that line in training of right. Okay, now they've done a marathon. Now they've got you to sit on one machine for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Am I going to put that into training? What is how much of that is worthwhile?
Yeah.
But then, like I say, I look at it then and go, at the same time, like, it's not worthwhile doing that. I'm not going to gamble putting all my eggs in the fact that could come up.
Right.
Likewise, I'm, like I say, on that strength and conditioning piece, I'm not going to gamble on the fact there's going to be, I'm not going to hang my hat on your 1 rep max, because the fact is that what matters the most is you can operate at 90% of that 1 rep max with a heart rate at X and be able to keep doing it. And that's kind of, I don't like to I like to hang my hat in the CrossFit realm of, well, as long as you can do it at this threshold, I don't care what that is, and I don't care what that is, but we'll work on them individually and then bit by bit blend them together.
Right.
Awesome.
You know, it's funny you mentioned 1 rep maxes. You look back to, you know, the first games in 2009 until now. Now, I think they've done the CrossFit total 2 or 3 times, and they've done some other 1 rep maxes in between there. But I mean, like, you're talking like 10 or 12. I did this stat at some point like 2 weeks ago. I have it somewhere on my computer. It's like 12 or 15 1 rep maxes over the course from 2009 to 2021. So like, why people are spending a lot of time on that, I'm not too sure, because you know that getting better at you know 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s is going to benefit what they're doing on the whole more than, you know, breaking them every week with a 1 rep max through their CNS. Now, am I correct in saying we'll be 33 days out from Madison? Okay. At what point do you pull volume from Emma, or do you keep it the same, or do you push it into it? How do you modulate that, like 7 to 10 days out?
This we have, like I said, this is the interesting thing on the adaptation of the athletes, is that we have a line of, like, now with Emma, after 4 years, 5 years even, what we are now, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20, 5 years, this is the 5th year. Like, I've pretty much got her her week out schedule sorted. Like, she used to come from the big traditional taper, whereas what we actually see is that she needs to still be doing, so she still needs an element of fatigue in the body to actually fire. If she gets too fresh, like, that's where she just goes woof, through the ceiling and that explodes. So it's almost that actually slight dampening of her, keeping that tension in the body so she doesn't feel too loose, too fresh, actually facilitates the performance. So she's in a, like, I've took a gamble this year in pushing her, because we got to the games last year, was her best performance at the games. and ultimately, like we always talk about, like, Emma's actually great at CrossFit. Like, put her in a CrossFit event. So if you look at it and analyze days 2, 3, and 4, where all the CrossFit events were, and like her performances are in the top 10, where she gets done is that 40-minute single modality aerobic piece, that individual kind of skill. So it's pretty much like, well, I'm balancing Emma's expectation of she needs to perform at semi-finals with I trust in her ability, and knowing, well, I know you're good enough to be good at semi-finals, not operating at your peak. And I took that gamble on, well, we need to push, because we can only push the engine for so long before we then need to start ramping up power output and everything like that. So we are now ramping up the power output with with the it is reducing volume, but it's still pretty high, because as that gamble of, well, they might have to do 300 air squats with a weighted vest on, and they're going to move quickly. So if I've not done that, I could ruin her weekend by her getting the worst DOMs ever on day 2 and not being able to move properly. So you are like that tapering process is, I'm working at intensity in volume. Like, so it isn't really the taper off. It's almost like, right now, okay, how much can you tolerate? And we just have bigger rest between sets, and it is going for that speed. So yeah, how much is the volume tailed off? It probably is that. It probably isn't, which is why it's in that horrible crossover of volume and intensity where all the issues come.
That's terribly interesting, though. I mean, so are you saying you think that maybe this is just Emma's mind frame, but her going in with a fatigue handicap kind of helps her keep pace throughout events, or as opposed to, kind of compensating to where she'd be really firing well, but when she's there, she performs so well that she kind of overdoes it and then drops below. So you're like, you're trying to carry a little bit of a handicap so she stays kind of even throughout her performance.
Yeah, and that's where I said there is a drop in volume, because she does always, like, all the numbers start coming now. So like I say, I have that, like, we've done that, right? Okay, you are doing strength throughout the year, but we're not peaking. I don't care what your run at max now is, because if you hit your one rep max now, are you going to hit your, like, we're only going up in intensity as well at the same time. So it's almost like, that volume, it is dropping now. I am dropping it down. It's just hard to say. Like, when you look at it, you still look at it and go, well, that doesn't look like much. If I didn't show you what was before, you go look at that and go, wow, that's high volume. But it clearly does. We bring the freshness in, because the numbers do just go woof, for the strength elements and stuff like that. So like it was speaking to her on a past experiences where she'd had full rest. And like I say, she has that ability. You send her in there fresh, she's primed, she's ready to go. And she gave herself rhabdo on the first day of the competition.
Yep. Okay. That's
and then wrote off a weekend. Like, it is that scenario that you're constantly playing with, and I do try not to, like, DOMs can ruin a weekend. Like, so we get you fresh, but so you give the guys 3 days off. They get 3 days off after semi-finals. Like, the first week, even the 3 days off, they can't walk with DOMs. Like, they regress that quickly. Recover that quickly, and then that first session, they just boom, and it hits them, and it's like, regardless. And it's like, if we do that, the competition's over.
Well, what you mentioned about, like, hitting this really weird spot where you're in a nasty position of volume versus intensity, and the only thing you can really do to modulate it is really extend those rest periods between workouts, between exercises, between sets. How much longer does that extend each session, give or take? And then if you're extending those sessions, give or take, are you having your athletes, and I'm saying this as non-registered dietitian or nutritionist, are you having them ingest anything during a training session, or like towards the end, like any, like, sort of like a amino acid drink or anything to boost mTOR, or anything sciencey fun like that?
Traditionally, like, I'll stay with the more the carbs, just making sure they're ingesting carbs to sustain the intensity there, and then taking that protein, like, after.
Okay.
Pretty much, I say that again. That's not, nutrition's not my
no, same. Neither. It's not us either.
But like I say, traditionally, like, always prioritize that energy production at that point in time, and then recovery comes when recovery comes, basically.
Right. I mean, the major issue I've always come across, my own personal, like when I train myself or other people, and they respond better to longer rests, which will equate out to longer sessions. And this session could be close to 2 hours. What I found the trick is, if they're doing a strength piece, it takes 2 hours, and they're coming back in the evening, 6 to 8 hours later, and they're doing even like a 30-minute Metcon or what have you. That extension of that first session is cutting off time that they could be eating during the rest of the day to some extent. So I'm just kind of wondering, do you having those carbs? Are you big on having them drink a carb drink, just so they can get in their system immediately, and then have it digest and actually eat actual real food? Or is it in the middle of a session somewhere they're eating an apple?
No, it'd always be fluid
Okay.
based.
What's your favorite kind of fluid carb?
I just whatever the guys can tolerate.
So it could be juice.
Yeah.
Okay,
whatever,
juice, Gatorade, okay.
Yeah, exactly. It could be just dextrose, supplements, powders, whatever really settles on their stomach, really. So I leave that pretty much. I just say, make sure you're having carbs, and it's what you can tolerate.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Coach, we've had you on for coming up on an hour and a half. I know I still have 2 quick questions that I like to ask every coach. Dustin, do you have anything you want to ask before we let this man get on and take care of a wild 1-year-old?
Yeah, I don't want this to be an over long-winded question, but you brought up a few things that have made me kind of curious. Especially, it seems like you're maybe becoming a guy that deals with bringing an athlete back from an injury. And I know I've kind of developed my own, from my strength conditioning mindset, some of my own rehab techniques that I like to utilize, as far as introducing concentric movement back in and doing isometrics and eccentrics and stuff. I guess maybe what do you do, or do you have anything that you kind of find is uniquely maybe your own practice when it comes to rehabbing some of the athletes, or maybe the specific one that you're bringing back from the knee? Was it MCL?
It was lateral meniscus. This is where the kind of the biomechanics standpoint comes in, and going from, right, if I breaking down that movement, or the movements into that analysis of, right, okay, if I've torn a hamstring, I obviously need to rehab the hamstring, but what do I also need within that process? So have they got a hamstring injury from swing phase because they actually lacked hip extension on the trail leg? Because if they lacked the hip extension, there was too much tension there, then that was blocking, and then that force was going to the hamstring. So I'm looking at that tissue got injured, but did that, yes, as kind of that philosophy of the tissue was overloaded, which is why it got injured. But was it overloaded because if I am, the analogy we use when we're teaching is, if there's 4 people lifting a table, if 2 people decide to do no work, the 2 people will only lift the table for so long. Whereas if we have 4 people working, then 4 people will hold that table for a longer period of time. So it's then looking at, did the hamstring get injured because it was overloaded, because it was doing too much, versus that it's not strong enough to do what it was doing. So it's then looking for the biomechanical weaknesses of, glutes aren't firing in deep ranges of hip flexion. So actually, I don't need to train them. My glute is then getting into that, I've had a complete mind block on Zacskiorski. There we go. So Zacskiorski, where he talks about inter and intramuscular coordination. So am I training a muscle for its so intermuscularly, so I'm just going to train the glute, or am I going to try and train the glute whilst tweak the glute so that it can learn how to do that movement within that movement as a skill, timed. So what we do is we manipulating then the environment to encourage the glutes to work more whilst doing deep eccentric hip flexion, rather than maybe just doing an isolated concentric glute action. Can I train that? And by doing that, does it offload the hamstring, like give the hamstring some support, so I can still actually do very functional, more functional movements. So actually I can still have that athlete doing a lunge, but I can position the foot so I'm actually going to get them to do it onto a step with a hand reach downwards. That means my glutes doing a little bit more, and I'm getting more knee flexion, so my hamstring is shortened, and I'm offloading the hamstring a little bit. So that's kind of what I would call it, the movement mechanics of training muscles to work within patterns rather than just isolating the muscles out of movements is where, and like you said, that's where a lot of athletes end up on the door, is because they have this aspiration of going to the next level in CrossFit, but they keep getting broken down with the program, and that is the athlete that I'm almost getting come to me. But yeah,
I think that middleman, the person that can kind of transition an athlete from their injury back to the actual field, there's still a huge gap there, because you'll see, them leave the physical therapist, and the measurements that they're looking at for that person to achieve, to be cleared, is not the standards that they need to achieve to be back on the field or back in the games, or whatever, the return to play. There's still a huge gap there. So no, I think that's super interesting. Not to mention, if you can trace back to, if this is speaking as a non-contact injury, if you can trace back and find out, at what point did that injury occur, now you're attacking it twofold. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, because we're addressing how it started, and then two, we're maybe making that area more robust, or at least getting it back to where it was. So you're back to full functionality. No, that's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, I gotta say, Dustin, robust is a great word. Heard you say, I was like, man, it's a great word. I love it. Playing off that, Jowse, before I go into mine, are you a believer in the idea that weak hips equal weak knees?
Yeah, we call the knees just like it. The knee is just a hole in the middle of the leg. Like it has we have no function of it. Like we can flex and extend it, but that's it.
Okay.
Like the rotation, the tibial internal rotation comes from good foot function. Like if the foot functions well, that's where tibial internal rotation comes. So how the foot functions and how the hip functions are those points, and that strength piece, or like I don't like to say if it's strength or if it's like what is it that made somebody better, because we don't truly know. Like I've had people who have increased the 1 rep maxes by giving them a stretching program, because actually now they could access the full length of the muscle, because they were so stiff they couldn't get into the position. And then you give them, like I said, that muscle, as we talked about before, the 4 tables. Here there was a muscle that was so tight it couldn't be accessed, so it put stress on the other ones. Then we stretch that muscle, give it some range. Now it's working in that bottom position of the squat. And now we've increased your 1 rep max by increasing flexibility. So flexibility can make you stronger, but then too much flexibility can obviously make you weaker, at the wrong type of stretch, etc. So yeah, effectively looking at the hip and going, right, okay, so actually it was someone fails a Trendelenburg tests, so they've got no frontal plane control in the glute. If I actually train that glute to work or the hip to be stabilized in the frontal plane, now it's more stable, it can produce more force. So now my strength goes up. So then I've increased hip stability, which has increased strength. So it is, which has then supported the knee because it's changed it's obviously affected the knee valgus. It's controlled the amount of knee valgus we're experiencing by working on the hip. So that would then be stability of the hip in the frontal plane, which has increased hip strength, which has reduced the knee. So yes is the answer, but
yes.
Okay.
The specifics matter.
How is the fun question, I suppose.
Yes.
Right. Or is the fun answer.
And just on that, because you brought up a very interesting point with stretching to increase a 1 rep max or multiple rep maxes, just to help you get in a better position, activate, and you use the full muscle. In America, a lot of the coaches, they differentiate stretching from flexibility from mobility. Mobility being able to tolerate a stretch under load. Flexibility just being like, I can touch my toes. Like, are you saying more of like straight flexibility where you're just lengthening out musculature, or are we talking like more like mobility, like world's greatest stretch or holding positions under load?
A blend, to be honest.
Okay.
A blend of, because if maybe I end up again, like we see it with the gymnasts and the dancers are the fun ones to train because they always hit the perfect positions, but then they don't necessarily have the tension in those positions. So you look at it from the outside and go, what does this look like? You go, oh, that's perfect technique. And then you actually go, okay, do you have any tension in your hamstrings? And like, nope. So it's kind of the same thing there of going, right, well, I'm gonna put the glute into a glute stretch where the glute has to be the muscle that is under load, but then what I do immediately after that. So again, it's not that isolating training down into parts. I try not to see it as like movement is like a squat is a stretch. Like I am stretching whilst I'm squatting, so that I'm doing mobility. If I put a lot of weight on it, then my adaptation is stretch. My adaptation is on my preferred adaptation now because I put max weight on is strength. But if I want to do it as a stretch, well, why don't I just do a sumo squat with toes forwards and work on my range of motion there? So there I'm stretching the adductors in a wide stance while squatting. I don't necessarily need to I could do an adductor stretch as well. Yeah. But I don't need to do this mobility move. I'm just going to manipulate my squat to stretch an area of the body. But if that muscle's not releasing, I might give it a stretch, but then immediately put it into neurologically that coordination piece of, okay, now you've got range. Now you need to learn how to coordinate within whilst the glutes working, whilst the quads are working, etc. So yeah, that's kind of where I sit. So yeah, the flexibility again, it's for want of as you guys can see by my presence on social media, it's very small. Is we get caught up in these new terminologies, but ultimately flexibility is the umbrella term which covers mobility is active stretching, not passive. Okay. So they're now trying to say that mobility is this with this. It's not. It's just, are you dynamically moving or are you being static and still? Or are you doing ballistic stretching? Like I just class mobility as dynamic stretching done slowly. Sure. And that could be a slow squat. That is still a stretch. Right. A forward lunge. Like people always like, oh, you're going to Jowse, you're going to get lunges. And I'm like, well, I'm going to give you different direction lunges, because why would I do a forward lunge? Well, as I'm doing a forward lunge, I'm stretching the hip flexors anyway. So why do I need to do a hip flexor stretch? I'm just going to do a lunge with my hands over my head because I'm stretching the hip flexors out. Like, save time. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned before you like single leg work. Like Dustin and I love single leg work too. I think for an athlete, that's has to happen like once a week at least, something of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, how many sports are actually bilateral? apart from CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
yes, that is that piece of where would I come in, going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation with football, where would I come in? Would I have a footballer doing a squat? Probably not.
Yeah.
Yes, he can move the most load there.
Yeah.
But by putting him under the most load, I'm risking making his low back. If they squat badly, I'm risking getting hyperactive erector spinae, hyperactive QLs, which is going to put pressure on the nerves. I'm probably going to end up with some kind of neurological hamstring issues and tearing because I tried to make them stronger. Whereas if I actually because I wanted to maximally load them, whereas actually if I put them into a lunge, which A, looks more like football, B, will never shift as much weight as a squat, but relatively, because of the changes in center of mass, actually I need the stimulus is the same. Like the strength stimulus is the same. You just can't see the weight, and that's what we always. Why I always talk about to athletes is like where we do use that, they get so caught up in numbers, and you go right, but the number doesn't matter. Like that, the CrossFit piece of if you can get your heart rate to 180 and you can only squat at 60% of max, you actually still got stronger because it's the 60% felt like 90%. So you've given yourself a strength stimulus.
Yep.
You just haven't seen the weight there. And it's the weight that's now becoming psychologically the issue. The stimulus is there. And that way, it's just like if we wanted to call it, it's your old school pre-exhaust, isn't it? For safety.
Yeah.
If I pre-exhaust them, I'm getting a strength stimulus with a lighter weight. Here I see the lunge as I'm getting a strength stimulus with a lighter weight that probably feels heavier because I've actually got to move my center of mass from A to B and control it and get back whilst having stability, balance, etc. at the same time. So I'm learning all these skills whilst doing one movement. Like, why would I not in functional training? Why would I not be ticking as many boxes as possible?
Yeah. I mean, like it's also a game of wear and tear. Like you mentioned, you're hitting 60%. It feels like 90. You're neurologically firing at 90, but your joints aren't taking a 90% beating. They're taking a 60%, beating, if you want to say that. But I mean, especially in CrossFit, you're doing so much so often. Like, why would you continue to break your body down? And like to your point, like old school pre-exhaust, and it, there are a lot of people listening to this right now that probably don't know what pre-exhaust is, but it works. Like it's true. Like actually, a fellow countryman of yours, not in CrossFit or professional athletics of any design, but Dorian Yates, he would do the very similar thing. Like his back workout, he always start with a pullover variation, and it made his pull down lighter. But to his own words, you would do a little bit less. It would be hard, but he wouldn't be facing the possible injury of using, 3 or 4 plates on a pull down, versus like the 2 plates and a quarter we used. Like,
which once again, now we're talking about these super high level people who have developed an exceptional tolerance to loads and fatigue. The rules can start to change a little bit.
Yeah,
I think is where you get
100%. All right, so my question for you, and I ask this with every coach, no matter what sport they're in. So Dustin, I apologize. I always sound like a broken record, but I like this question a lot. I have to know.
It's very telling.
Thank you so much. If you had CrossFit athlete, games athlete, stud, male, female, they could only train 1 day a week. What does that day look like what does that day look like from sun up to sunset? And when they're on their own, let's say they're doing mobility on their own, the 6 days a week, that one day, run us through what that day looks like. Generic person, run us through it. It can be multiple workouts throughout the day.
Generic person.
Yeah. Generic person, sure.
I mean, we've now got a generic program, but I don't do well with the generic person.
Yeah, neither do we.
Because I'm then going, well, is it a high power athlete or is it a low power athlete?
Yes, this is why this becomes once you're thinking about all those things, it becomes a very.
Let's say this, because most people listening know who this person is. Let's say it's Emma, and she can only train 1 day a week.
Yeah. start with cardio.
Okay.
Cardio blended with cardio blended with low level leg skills.
Okay.
Wall ball, body weight, light barbell, squats, lunges, kind of that low level simple gymnastics work, rope climbs, into then, so lasting approximately anywhere between 40 and 60 minutes.
Okay.
Then through the middle of the day, I'd then hit I'd blend the heavier barbell work. Working priority being
yeah, it's a good one. I know.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an hour and a half in itself, is it not?
Yeah,
yeah. Long aerobic in the morning, definitely. Blended with skills, because that's the primary focus. I'd finish with, I say, as much as it's not the traditional textbook, I'd finish with a power output in the evening. Okay. Because she's so like her being in in a dampened state, then keeps her safer. And then middle range in the middle of the day. So if I could say over stimulus, it'd be that. It'd be long aerobic in the morning.
Yep.
Middle stimulus, 8 to 20 minutes work in the middle of the day, and then sub 4 minutes in the evening. So power output below 4 there. So it'd be, but very dampened 4 minutes.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Coach, we've had you on for an hour and a half now. So like, before you go, is there anything you want to plug? We'll put the links down below.
Plug. Oh
yeah.
Like we've just really on that in wanting to combat seeing people come with lower back pain from following mobility only programs. We just released a program. It starts tomorrow called RP Move.
Okay.
Which at redpillgeneric.co.uk. So if you follow the RP Move program, that's 15 to 20 minutes of blended stretching, stability, functional range stretching, working on your primary patterns, so squats, hinges, single leg work, thoracic mobility, pressing, and gymnastic variations. So it works specifically through movement patterns, prepping you for that rather than just doing like learning how to control the ranges that you're developing rather than just isolated developing range. So develop that. So that would be the big plug, really. To say, and then we've got the education side, so redpilltraining.com. We've got mentorship programs and things like that, and then one-to-one coaching. So that's more the like Red Pill Generic is what it says on the tin. The English humor comes out and just says, "Why do you call it generic? It's not sexy." It's because it's exactly what it says it is. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to pretend something we're not.
Right.
Here's a system, and because of that, it comes at those lower price points. And then the more bespoke coaching education platforms are available on redpilltraining.com. So very generic. There's a general all over plug.
Sounds great. All right, well, Coach, we'll let you go, and will you be able to come back on down the road? That's something we got to ask.
If I've not bored the life out of you.
Oh,
then,
no. Oh, no. I have more things I want to talk to you about. I'm sure Dustin does, because he writes down a whole laundry list of things. So we'd love to have you back on. We love your approach, and you're very thoughtful with the way you make your approach.
Oh, I appreciate that. Oh, thank you very much. It's been great. Like, I didn't realize it's an hour. I've actually got to do another call in 20 minutes.
We didn't bore you either.
No. It's been fantastic. It's been like I said, I think when you meet like-minded individuals, it's always great, right?
Yeah.
Like we get to have the beer conversations and like, let's just chew the fat and talk fitness. Like I said, I just hope that an hour and a half people haven't switched off listening to this. The dulcet tones of the English Yorkshireman.
Well, either way, we do it for selfish reasons.
He's got a boring tone.
I was entertained. I appreciate it. So.
Excellent. Will you be coming to Madison with her?
Unfortunately, I'm not this year.
Okay.
I have Sam is going to back Emma in the corner.
Okay.
So Sam is in Emma's corner. We spoke about it as checked with Emma that she was. I just thought it'd be nice for Sam backed Emma at Wodapalooza. So right. I was going through the middle of exams and everything like that. So she did all right at Wodapalooza.
She did pretty good.
Yeah. So it was kind of one of those scenarios of Sam is in done her final year and her going to the games and being there and being a part of that. I just wanted to see if that was it. And like I say it seems strange, but it's almost a test of all the work we've done. The work is done by the time she crosses the line, and then it's on her. It's on us, but it's like I can't do anything when she's on the floor. So it's almost that it sounds like a kind of doing ourselves out of a job, but my goal of a coach is to empower, isn't it? So if I can facilitate that my athlete I need to make myself redundant. Like she can regulate her feelings pre-post workout, during a workout. If she can do all that, know how to execute, I've done my job as a coach rather than me being the one that I have to be there. Like that, it's almost like a bit of a test of the test of the work of like have we done the right things. And it might not be we'll see. She was happy for it. Like she wasn't. I checked that it was something she wanted, and she was like, "Yeah, it sounds great." Because we're going to do our fly over to Ireland on Tuesday, so I'm basically going to do. Emma gets a lot of confidence in the prep work leading in, so we're just going to put the time there where we don't normally get to spend that time. Yeah, spend more time there, getting really good quality training in to build her confidence leading in, and then dealing with the stresses and strains of competition time is. Yeah, we've done a lot of work on that, so gotcha. I'm looking forward to seeing how she goes.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for coming on. We're gonna cut you loose, get you on your way, and I'll talk to you soon.
No worries.